Welcome to the latest edition of Doing It Differently. Today we're going to be talking about people and culture, and I'm joined by Louise Otten, who is our head of people. How are you doing, Louise?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Good to be here today, Rob.
Great to have you here. Let's start. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Louise, and how we started working together.
Yeah, sure. So it's great to be here. I've joined you guys in the last couple of months as head of people. But as we were just talking about, I've kind of been working with Infinity for the last couple of years in the background, kind of helping the leadership team really upskill themselves on their coaching and leadership capabilities. Because I have a coaching background, so my kind of area of passion really is really helping people think about how they can grow high-performing teams, how leaders can really set themselves up for success around, developing good communication skills, and how to really help people kind of collaborate well together. My background is executive coaching and sort of team coaching, and I'm really excited to be able to bring that in-house now and help you at Infinity roll this out to the wider group really, and think about how we can bring in good coaching skills into the Infinity group.
Yeah, I think that's it's a really interesting point. Actually, we talk about HR, and it seems like HR is maybe more of a process-driven, compliance-driven function that used to exist, and now we talk about people services where we're focusing on the people and the individual needs. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see you guys take a slightly different, viewpoint on this now, because HR is obviously a really important function from a business, which, has to be well covered, but also then looking at it from a point of view of what else is important for people. So we know that the future of work is something that we're going to talk about today, but like helping you set up, a good working culture, understand what your people really want to so that they're set up to be at their most productive and happy, and being able to kind of come in and look at that sort of strategic viewpoint is really interesting to see a company at this point in their growth to invest in that kind of work. So I'm really excited that Infinity are open to looking at this, and obviously it plays to my interests and passions. So really keen to come in and help you guys look at what it is that people want from a great working culture, and help the leaders and managers to help roll this out as well. So it's a great sort of future focused look at people and talent and culture and HR all together. So I think from a development point of view for a company like Infinity, this is really going to play into your strengths and your growth, and it's really helping you achieve that, achieve what your values and ambitions are as well. Because what is it that helped you think about investing in this kind of work? Why was it that Infinity decided that this would be a good place to focus on?
Yeah, so I think our journey really started if we go back to kind of COVID, really, when we had a period where we didn't really know what we wanted to do as a business. We kind of had a bit of a pause. We had that year of COVID where everyone, I guess, panicked a little bit as to what was going on. But it was a great opportunity for us to do a bit of self-reflection and to do some planning for the future. We knew that COVID was going to, at some point, be a distant memory, but it gave us a great chance to look at ourselves and how we wanted to grow. And I think one of the key things that came out of that was, in order to grow, in order to be a great business, we had to focus on our people, and there was lots of different kind of ways we thought about doing that. And one of the things was we knew we had to make investment in people our number one priority. So our number one KPI as a management team is people engagement, and how we do that, followed by client engagement. We feel that happy people internally is going to lead to happy outcomes for our client. And ultimately we feel that the rest will take care of itself. So it's very easy, I think, for businesses to say their people were the number one priority. It can be quite an empty statement, that. So we really wanted to think how we could do it. We wanted to get into the psychology behind what drives people. And we fell upon a book by a guy called Dan Pink called Drive. And Dan Pink talks about three key elements that really drive people. and certainly around the workplace. And Dan Pink, by the way, is a psychologist that looks into these things. And we found the number one thing is purpose, giving clear purpose, being very clear about who you are, what direction you're going as an organisation, who you're working for and who you represent. So it's about values. It's about autonomy. So giving people control of themselves and what they do and the way that they work, which is really prevalent, I think, during that COVID period where everyone was kind of forced into remote working. And there's some great things that have come out of it. Obviously, there's businesses are still trying to grapple with the best way to manage and lead their teams. But one of the great things, obviously, was autonomy and the fact that more people are now working from home. And in fact, that flexible working is now demanded by most people. So understanding how that works and how that comes into making a great culture is really interesting. And then finally, mastery, that continual development, that continual learning. How can we provide a platform where people feel like they're achieving things and can be the best versions of themselves? So, it's been a really interesting journey. We've done some really good things, and we've made probably some mistakes on the way as well. But I think it's been continually listening to what our teams are saying and making changes. If we've done something's not working, we can change it quickly.
Yeah, it's brilliant to see you putting that all into place as well. And I think building on that, you've also, we've looked at a few other models as well that kind of build on that Dan Pink model and drive. So also thinking about what else makes people happy at work. And we know that on top of having a good sense of purpose and being able to be autonomous and be able to progress and master what they're doing, they also need to have really good, strong connections with the people that they work with. So, and part of the challenge of the ways of working and being hybrid or more remote is making sure that we're maintaining those connections or maximizing opportunities for them and making sure they're meaningful. So I think we'll probably touch on that in a bit, but that's a really sort of fourth key area that's really, really vital.
It was funny. I think we kind of forced certain engagement. We all remember the Teams quizzes back in the day that we were all kind of trying to do, and all these kind of online engagements that we had to do during COVID. But it's about taking some good things that came out of that and blending it with kind of more physical engagements. That's certainly, I think, been our belief. So what would you say the key principles that we believe in create a high-performing, happy teams at Infinity? What are those key principles there?
Well, I think the key areas are, so some of the ones we've just touched on, so definitely helping a business and its people be clear on what their purpose is. So what is it that you're doing that kind of has a greater sense beyond just getting up and sitting at your desk every day? So how are you understanding what you're doing that's kind of greater than yourself? And then taking that down into a sort of smaller level as well. So do the individual teams and people know what their purpose is when they come to work? And do they feel like that actually means something to them? So I think that's really important. Then obviously having that sense of autonomy. So being able to kind of have a sense of how you work and where you work, being trusted to work in a way that is meaningful for you. And one of those things is around flexibility. So, people really want to be able to work flexibly now, and they need to be trusted to do that. And as a result, they have to demonstrate that back, but also we have to give them that trust first. And then obviously mastery. So it's really important. So do people know how they can progress? Do they know what opportunities are available to them to be able to grow and learn and get better at what they do? And how much kind of control do they have over what directions they can go in? And then we also need to make sure that people feel like they're well connected to each other. So how are we building those opportunities for good collaboration and good engagement across the business, especially when you've got a mixture of remote working and in office working. And we also need to really understand what people need in order to stay physically and mentally well. So are we, as an organisation, making sure that we're looking after everybody's well-being and our conversations being had in a way that helps people feel like they can talk about how they're feeling? One of the biggest learnings from COVID, wasn't it, was that people felt like they were able to open up a bit more about how they were getting on and open up when they were struggling. And it's important that we create a space that allows for that to happen. And part of that is creating something called a psychologically safe workspace, which is a bit of a coachy term. And everyone always goes, what does that really mean? But that's all about having a culture and an environment where people feel they can go and talk to people about how they're feeling. They don't feel scared of like talking openly about trying something new or making a mistake, and no one's going to kind of come and reprimand them if they've taken a bit of they've made a very good decision, but perhaps it hasn't worked, and then something needs to change. So we need to be able to own our mistakes and talk about them and learn from them. And part of all of this is helping our managers and leaders feel empowered and enabled to have these kind of conversations and set up their teams so that they can kind of look inside themselves and think, well, are we hitting these 5 or 6 key areas? Are we making sure that we are, allowing our people to work in this way? And that's one of the exciting kind of remits of coming into this role, is to be able to help kind of roll out that thinking across the board to, as you grow and get bigger and get and bring in more talent. These are kind of the sort of sounding boards that we can keep coming back to on top of what your values are. Like, are we ensuring that our people are able to work in this way? So I think it's really important that we can kind of make a simple framework for people to follow, because fundamentally it's about putting people first, like you said, and not just ticking a box and talking about it as if it's like just a thing to do. But if we can really show and demonstrate that we are achieving these things and they are part of our KPIs for the whole business, we're hopefully going to be able to demonstrate this back to our people that we are doing these things correctly. Because from an approach point of view, at Infinity, you've got a diverse workforce now, haven't you? You've got people working in the office sometimes all the time. You've got some people who are fully remote. You've got some people who want a mixture of hybrid working. Like, what have you seen that's sort of changed, that's helped, grow the workforce like that? And how do we attend to all their different needs?
Yeah, I think personally in today's environment, and I can only speak for our experiences, we have to talk to everyone at the same time on various different platforms. So, and that looks like, technically a good digital environment so they can work with the latest technology. It means a good physical environment. So we've still got a head office that's very much our home. And so the people that come in more regularly, some people come in every day because that's how they like to work, making that that workspace collaborative. So when they do come in, have they got quiet spaces where they can have video calls, because most of the time they're going to be on Teams. Have they got collaboration spaces where they can sit down in teams and work together? And does the space suit their needs, and does it feel comfortable, and all that kind of stuff? So I think, from a sort of working environment, it's really important that you attract and you invest in all those different areas. You talk about having a safe space. It's important that we understand that sometimes, we've got people working across Europe and all over the UK, and we don't see those guys very often. And what we need to do is make sure we've got a framework in place. So we've committed to having regular company events where we get teams together and we bring people that perhaps don't always work together into a space, and whether that's our awards night or the brand launch party we had earlier this year, or it might be the festive party at the end of the year. So we're trying to create as many physical interactions as possible, so the people that don't get together very often can get together. So again, it's about trying to create those experiences for everybody to address those needs.
Yeah, and for them to be meaningful in the moment, aren't they, as well? So we're seeing lots of noise in the media, aren't we, about different companies asking their workforces to return to the office. But I think what you're doing really well at Infinity is you encourage people to come in, so you're collaborating, so there's meaning in that work together, and so people feel like there's a purpose behind it. It's not just a sort of tick box exercise of you must do X, Y, and Z. It's more let's understand what the purpose is of being together, so it feels more productive when you're there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You get get the team in to actually work and collaborate together, or get two teams in to work and collaborate together. It's really important that there is a purpose behind it. And you're reading all these articles, X, Y, and Z, and even a lot of the tech companies are trying to force people back in, and they're saying that people are more productive. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think there's different people work in different ways at different in different environments. Certainly I can sometimes benefit from working remotely, but often I like to be in the office as well. So it's and listen, we certainly haven't got it right. I don't think anyone's got it right just yet. But it's a case of, for me, just continually listening, continually making sure we've got systems in place that can monitor this kind of stuff, listening to what people are saying. And obviously, we can see from the output as well, is our, customer client satisfaction, are those levels going up? Are they increasing? And as long as we've got this data, we can continually learn and develop our approach.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really important. And I guess, would it be helpful just to sort of think about why we invest in why we're so sort of passionate about doing this kind of work and investing in the people and thinking about how we set up the workspace? And we know that, retaining talent's a massive challenge for lots of organisations, isn't it? And it's really, once we've got the best people in, we want to keep them because it's expensive to lose people. And we know that, the more we can invest in all of these things that matter, the more we're going to help reduce those attrition costs, because we know that it can cost nearly 2 times someone's salary when somebody leaves, and more for sort of the more senior people there are in the business. So I think it's really important that we put in the resources to think about what keeps our people, what do people want when they're progressing, how do they want to work, how do we listen to them and make sure that we're responding to what they need, and then role model the kind of good behaviours that help drive all of that, company culture and good leadership. Do you have any sort of thoughts on what have you seen in the past that's shown that this actually does work? Like, well, how do we measure the impact of doing this work from your point of view? I guess, how have you seen the benefits of this?
Good question. Okay, listen, we're in an environment now where attracting talent is massive. There is a skill shortage with the introduction of AI and all these new technologies. Again, COVID has driven a lot of this. We've seen our clients invest in these new systems to automate a lot of these processes. And like I say, when AI is now coming in, it's going to make the talent shortage even greater. So for us, attracting and retaining talent is paramount to us growing. So if we want to hit our growth targets, if we want to achieve what we want to achieve as a business, we've got to be a great place to work, and we've got to build a great culture. Simple as that. And what can we do differently to maybe some of the big tech companies? How do they operate? What do they do? So there's certainly some learnings that we can take from them. But there's also some stuff that we can do where we're probably a bit more agile. We can introduce new schemes and change things as we go along. Because we're smaller, we can listen more and react to people's needs instead of often people feeling like a number. And that's our advantage. That's our competitive advantage. But we have to invest in this area. One of the challenges for us, and I think as an industry as a whole, is how do we bring young talent in? How do you bring new talent in? And it's a really tricky one, that, because, when I first started working, I worked in an office and I learned just business etiquette. How do you talk to people? How do you get the best out of people? How do you, speak to various different, whether it's suppliers or partners or whatever it is, and that stuff's really difficult to pick up remotely. So, that is a challenge, and how we're navigating through that and what the future of that looks like. It's still work in progress. I think that's why the office space is important, and that we do have senior people in here as well as obviously junior people, so they can learn from them. So what are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts around talent for tomorrow? How do you feel that's going to pan out, and how do you feel that the apprentices, the grads of tomorrow, how are they going to come in and really learn quickly?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really important point to be really conscious of, isn't it? Because it's great to be growing your own talent. I think if you can bring in apprenticeships and then retain them and have your kind of evergreen talent, they're going to have more loyalty to the business, and they will, grow as we grow. So investing in the really, they're typically called softer skills, but I don't really like that term. I think they're more human skills, like helping people understand how to work in an organisation, how to work in an office is really important. And if they are remote, for example, when they're perhaps more junior into their role, you almost have to kind of over consciously communicate what's expected, maybe how to behave, how to communicate, how to be a good team player. So I think even an initiative that we're doing, thinking of doing at the moment, is to almost create like a set of not guidelines and certainly not rules, but like, what is our way of being? How do we expect our people to show up? How do we want to be together so that we're at our best? And if we can have like something that we can show new people, this is what we expect, this is how we want to be, because we know this is what brings out the best in each other. It just helps manage expectations for those people who are coming in perhaps new to this role. And I think one of the biggest challenges all organisations have now is, because you're not sat next door to somebody, perhaps at a desk every day, you're not having that kind of subliminal learning environment. You're not overhearing what's going on in the office as much. You're not necessarily having those quick conversations that perhaps you would have done if you were in the office all the time. So I think for new starters and apprenticeships, having that face-to-face time is vital, as much as is practical and is wanted. We know that new people into organisations do want flexibility, so we've got to honour that, and we'd be wrong to not honour that. So it's finding the balance between the two. And even one of the initiative we've got at the moment, isn't it, is working out loud. So how can we use tech to help us work out loud a bit more? So it's very easy to be quite siloed when you're busy, heads down working, and some departments don't know what's going on across the board. So we're trying to encourage people to think a little bit more out loud, share what they're doing, share wins, share successes, but also share perhaps things when something's been a challenge and how they've overcome it, and just have more of that kind of cross communication, so that we're always learning, we're always absorbing information from each other that's useful and meaningful. So I think that's definitely something that we're going to see more of as we recruit more remotely and grow through the grad and the apprenticeship schemes. And I think part of that as well is setting up our people managers, to be able to then know how to do this as well, how to do it well. How do they become? How do they kind of come from a lead with a coaching example in a way? So how do they help their teams grow and develop without having to micromanage or be in their pockets all the time? How do we help set up the leaders to be able to have those good conversations, to encourage people to be a bit more autonomous? And if we are encouraging people to be autonomous, they need to know what that means, because perhaps someone new into a role won't be familiar with that, and they might need a bit of guidance around what that means and what's expected from them, how to be a good communicator. And all of this really comes back to communication, doesn't it? Like, can't over-communicate what you're doing and how to do it. And I think a lot of problems stem from people not quite knowing how to perhaps have a more challenging conversation, or feeling a bit uncomfortable about that. So that would be my kind of key takeaway.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. That's a piece of work that we're doing at the moment, this culture code piece, where, what does good look like? What does bad look like? And I think, often people just need to be led in those areas. And certainly, when you're hiring people and values and stuff, basically you're not having to reteach them those values, but you are having to sometimes say, look, this is how we do things here. This is what it looks like. This is what a meeting looks like. This is what a one-to-one might look like. So it's really important that there's consistency across those different management layers throughout the business. I'm really loving the new Working Out Loud initiative we're doing at the moment. So this is where we're using Viva Engage. We use it anyway as a tool, and have done for a number of years, previously as Yammer, as some of you might know. But it's really trying to get people to talk about what they've been doing in their days, what they've achieved, and instead of just having maybe some personal stuff and a bit of business stuff in it. get all the departments and all the people to talk about it, because you don't have those those conversations at the coffee machine often anymore. And so it's a great tool to share those experiences.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you can always tie it back to your values. So obviously, we're a very strong values-led culture at Infinity, which is great. And they are such a brilliant sort of guiding star to come back to if something's not quite in alignment with where you want it to be, or something's a bit off. You can always sort of tie it back in and say, well, is this in alignment with us demonstrating, our ambition, value, or whatever it might be? Because it takes away the emotion of when something's tricky or more difficult to handle. You can kind of say, well, actually, hang on a minute. Maybe if we could just make a few more small changes here, or communicate in a different way here, or show up for each other in a slightly different way, that helps us stay on track with what we're trying to achieve. So, yeah, and it's a bit of it's a great way to get everyone involved, isn't it? You can get everybody to have their say what they believe is right and wrong, and then people feel more connected to why we're doing that work. Yeah. And if we think about bringing in new talent, I think one of the first sort of touch points that people have is the onboarding process, which I think is a really important part of making sure that when people first start, that these are the sort of things that are available to them. So, that initial first impression that's made of the company, how do they know what's expected of them? So if we can say to them, look, this is what our culture is, these are what our values are, this is how we expect people to show up, it just takes away some of that uncertainty, doesn't it, of what's how you're supposed to be. And especially for the more perhaps younger generation coming in, who've maybe not, it might be their first role, they can really benefit from that guidance and sort of bit of hand holding initially, and then hopefully they can sort of take it and run with it themselves and build on it, because the culture is always evolving. I think that's what's nice about it. Yeah. So Rob, how have you been recruiting for top talent, and what have been the key learnings about getting this right over the last few years?
I think the biggest change for us, and if there's any recruiters out there, cover your ears, because you're probably going to hate this approach, but we actually employ our own recruiters. We don't use agency recruiters, and that was a decision we made probably 2 years ago. What it means is our recruiters aren't, they're not targeted, or they're not incentivized around how many people they hire and who they are and all this kind of stuff. They're basically, it's about getting the right fit, and it's about finding people that fit our culture, and it's about them really understanding us as a business. So they're fully employed by us, and they get to know us as a business. So it starts from that initial engagement. They talk passionately about us as an organisation and the kind of things that we do, and I think that really helps with that hiring process, because, like I said earlier, if you're recruiting on values, then you haven't got to train the values. So people have kind of bought into the whole thing from the beginning, and so we've been working on different ways in which we do that. The interview process, we just have a 2-stage interview process now. We get everyone in the room. We don't have multiple interviews with lots of individuals, and that's just been work in progress. We've seen what's worked, what hasn't worked, and we feel like we're in a good place. It's also once someone's successfully joined Infinity, what does their first week, month, 3 months look like? How can we make that engagement as good as it can possibly be? And some of that stuff's repeatable. So whether it's training or introductions to teams, some of it we can automate. And some of it is planned. The managers have to plan what that engagement looks like. So, yeah, it's really, really important, that onboarding, that first that feeling you get, when you first come in the door and you leave at the end of your first week. Planning all that stuff is really key. And I think there's lots of little things that we can. Recently we've started recruiting people on a Wednesday as opposed to a Monday, because it just shortens that first week. We have 2 kind of onboarding days a month now, as opposed to kind of every Monday. So we can have more people interact with them in those first few days. So little things like that have made a big difference. And again, it's continually listening to people, talking to the people that have come on. What's your experience been like? What feedback can you give us? And we still get stuff, because often people are travelling over to on board with us. They could be, from anywhere really. And so one of the most recent ones was, what is there to do around the office? Where's good to eat? What's a good thing to do? So we'll start putting a guide together for people that come down and want to learn a little bit more about the local area and do something for their sort of onboarding days when they're down here. So it's continual learning really. It's continual learning.
Yeah, and I think as someone who's been recently onboarded, that I think I can certainly vouch for the experience working really well. You're in the office for the first 3 days or a week, wherever you really get to know people, and it's a really well organised process where you get to meet everybody across the business. It's a bit of a here are all our different departments, here are all our different teams. Get an opportunity to ask all those questions. So it's certainly working, and like you said, it's an ongoing process that's been constantly reviewed. And I think being able to, as we get bigger and recruiting more people more often, being able to have days where you've got new starters starting together is reassuring for people to feel like they're part of a new cohort coming in. So it's certainly working from that point of view. And I think this culture code work's really going to help, because you'll be able to offer people a quick snapshot of this is who we are, this is how we want to be, and it gives them that kind of guidebook, I suppose, setting some context around it, rather than feeling like they walking into a completely brand new environment.
So Louise, there's someone that's recently come in, and obviously you've been involved in a leadership offsite recently, and kind of listening to the things that we're talking about. What are we doing here to help drive communication, collaboration, and engagement from a kind of newbie's perspective?
Yeah, well, lots of things. I think certainly from someone who's new, I think one of the great advantages is certainly the office. So being able to come into the office as and when it suits. You've got brilliant collaborative working space there. So we recently had a refurb. It's set up well for being able to have in-person meetings and just sit and work wherever you want and get to know different parts of the business, and that's really encouraged. Everybody's incredibly welcoming and friendly. You've got great internal technology platforms where we can learn to engage with each other. So you use Viva Engage, like you said, or what was Yammer, for talking about what you're doing, for being able to praise people, connect with different teams. This whole initiative around working out loud, sharing what you're doing. Maybe at the end of each day, people are starting to sort of think about, what have I done today that would be helpful for someone else to know, and just popping that into their team site. So you can just start to build up a picture of what's going on across the business. As someone who's new coming in, that's super helpful, because there's so much going, there's so much activity, and even things like knowing, which clients are we working with, which team is doing what project, things like that. Those are the kind of things that you gradually absorb over time. But if you can see that happening day to day, it just helps speed up that sort of onboarding process. We've also got an initiative of bringing in 2 teams a month so that they can start to work together collaboratively. So actually organising a day where 2 teams are going to be in the office and think about how can we help them connect together. So I'm going to be running, for example, some workshops with those teams, thinking about what are the challenges they share when trying to work together. So maybe getting them to put themselves in each other's shoes for an hour and think about what are the challenges that might come across, for example, a marketing team and a product team. How do they work better together? And just really get people just talking a bit more, having those human interactions in person together. You've mentioned the events that you do, but you've obviously got company events which get people together. So the awards night, which recognise when employees have done well and lived up to the values, and recognising what they've done. And we know from experience and from research that recognition is really important. So recognising how employees have done really impacts their employee satisfaction scores. So we use Office Vibe as our employee engagement survey tool that we use every week to understand what people are feeling like across the business. And for those that haven't heard of that, that gives us a kind of a measure of how happy people are, how much how likely they are to recommend this company to other people, and it gives them an opportunity to give feedback as well. And we know that if you give people a platform to be recognised and give managers an opportunity to celebrate when someone's done something well, you're more likely to get a greater sense of satisfaction back from the employee, and therefore they're more likely to stay. They're less likely to start looking elsewhere for another role, and they're more likely to be invested in recommending the organisation to other people. So it's a really important tool to use, and we really encourage people to praise out loud their members of teams and their colleagues, but also not just a top-down approach. It's a bottom-up approach as well, and peer-to-peer. It doesn't have to just be managers recognising their teams. We want to encourage this across the business. So that really helps kind of drive engagement. We've also, obviously, from a progression point of view, we have a learning and development process where we make sure that people are continually holding good one-to-ones so that they know how their people are getting on, their teams are getting on. And we also have regular reviews where we get managers to think about who's performing well, who might need a bit of extra help, who's a high potential, who's really rising to the challenge, who might need additional development. We've got a lot of training that goes on across the business. People are constantly doing Microsoft exams. They might be doing a management training course if they've been recently promoted. So there's a lot of activity around development and growth and progression, and it's and I think as a part of our drive to maximise engagement, it's really important to recognise that and get that streamlined. And that's one of the kind of areas that I'll be really focusing on now that I'm here. And I think another one to remember as well in terms of engagement is thinking about what the company gives back to its employees as well. So from a benefits point of view, you've obviously got some brilliant benefits that Infinity offer out to employees that really help support them and help them feel valued and trusted. So we have things like unlimited leave, which allow people to be more autonomous in how they manage their work-life balance. And that really helps them think about, well, over the course of the year, how do I want to make sure I'm looking after myself? How do I make sure I book in that time so I've got time off for a break or with family? Just gives them a bit more flexibility about how they work. Obviously, flexible working we've touched on. We have things like a share scheme where people can if they meet their KPIs and meet their targets, if they've been here a certain amount of time, they start getting access to a company share scheme. There's lots of really brilliant benefits that give back to the business. And as a result, we see more engagement from our people as well. And it really drives that sense of engagement and happiness and autonomy. And ultimately, if teams are more engaged, then they're going to be happier and they're going to be more productive, and therefore our clients are going to be served better. So it's that cycle of everything sorts itself out after that. So I think those are kind of the key things that are happening. Anything that you'd add to that I've missed off?
I think Office 5 has been we've been using it now for about 3 years, and I think it's an amazing tool. And again, what it allows us to do is continually listen and hear what people have got to say. And I'm really proud to say that, it's one of the things I really enjoy opening when I get them through on probably 2 or 3 times a week. I get the Office 5 surveys through, and just a sheer number of people that participate in it. And I think it's about making sure that you listen to those things, you address them if they need to be addressed, even in a one-to-one basis or as a group, and you take action on them. And I think that's the most important thing, is people don't think, I'm just going to say something and nothing's going to get done, is that we actually take action on this stuff. So Office 5 is really good. I think my sort of plan this year, and I've shared with the business, is for us to be more transparent. As an organisation, we have, as we've grown quite rapidly now, we've got different layers of management, and from the board to the senior management team, and beyond that. So it's how can we take all this data and information that we work on collectively on a daily, weekly basis? How can we start sharing that with the teams? And it's as much about how those teams can understand that data and make sure that they can make sense of it, and then sharing it with the teams. So they, we can then get feedback, and people can come up with from different teams, come up with some great suggestions on how we can improve moving forward. So for me, that collaboration piece is also about how we can take all this data that we've now got and really feed that back to the company and kind of be very open, transparent in what we're doing. I think also, I think Bigger Friday's been really good. Again, we've been doing that now for a few years, and that's kind of one of our rituals. Every Friday, it's an all hands. It's at 4:30, so it's physically run in our offices. Sometimes it's a remote session, but we've got a big social space where we've got a big screen. So if someone's presenting remotely, they can do that. But it's about, again, having a physical event. In the office, we have drinks and we play pool and put some music on and stuff. But we do a presentation, and then people can join in remotely with Teams. But also that session's recorded, so people who aren't available at the time or want to listen back to it can listen back to it next week. So I think, again, that's about doing a kind of all hands team kind of thing where we're talking. It could be about a particular project, it could be about a particular department, it could be, sales figures or delivery stats, whatever it might be. It's quite fluid, but having that every week and being able to talk to people in different mediums has been really, really important ritual for us. And also the kind of 3x3 reviews, I think, are really important as a business. As you grow as an organisation, you need to make sure that everyone's engaged with you as you go on. You've got more and more people coming in. Louise, tell us a little bit about how 3x3 reviews work and what they look like at Infinity.
Yes, I think they're a really important part of the sort of progression process. So we have a system whereby we ask each department head to regularly review how their teams are doing and look at whether they are, where is each person in terms of their progression? Where are they in terms of how well they are demonstrating company values? Are they, for example, someone who's really demonstrating themselves as a high potential? Are they potentially moving up into a leadership space, or are they someone that might need some additional support in the meantime? Are there additional training programs that they need to go on? So it helps us kind of map out where people are within each team, because it's sort of constantly evolving. Obviously, every team is moving all the time. We've got new people coming in, and we want to try and minimise losing our top talent. So it really gives us that overview of who we want to be really supporting. How do we help the leaders make sure they're having the right conversations with the right people at the time, identifying the right development plans and career pathways for them. And if we've got really clear career pathways, it helps everybody understand how do they get from A to B and what do they get as a result of that. So it's this kind of culture of continuous improvement, continuous feedback. We really encourage this idea of kind of comfort over candor. So this idea of making sure that we're having those conversations that might be a little bit more uncomfortable so that we can help people continue to be at their best, because it's easy to let things sit and not be challenged because it's perhaps more maybe not as comfortable as we'd like it to be. But these 3x3s and this kind of process of constantly looking at what needs improving and how can we make that happen drives that culture of excellence and allows people to kind of bring their best selves to work. And I think it's really, really important part of that engagement piece as well. And people want this. People want to know how they can progress. People want to know how they can improve. Yeah. It's part of our human nature to be, going back to that Dan Pink book, to be mastering our skills. If you're just stagnant, then you tend to, in the long run, lose a sense of purpose, lose a sense of motivation. And actually, we want to be making sure we are moving those people forward as much as we can. So I think that's a really, really great process that we've got in place here that supports people's progression and opportunities to master their trade.
Fantastic. So it wouldn't be a discussion without talking about AI and the impact of AI. From your point of view, from a people point of view, an engagement point of view, what are your thoughts around AI and how it's going to impact the workplace?
So I think there's obviously some nervousness around it, but I think if we look at the positives first, it's going to help us communicate better. So I think one of the big things that we see in terms of how AI is already supporting us is that it helps us think about how do we maximize our time? So are there, for example, meetings that we can't attend because of other commitments or time differences? And therefore, can we use AI to help us catch up on stuff? And therefore, we can use our time when we're in the office or in our working hours to have more in-person conversations. So I think that's going to be a bonus for people leaders. For example, Copilot, which I'll let you talk about in a minute, Rob, but if we can use tools like Copilot, like a recording tool, a transcribing tool that helps us kind of catch up quickly on something that we perhaps didn't need to be there in person because we're doing something else that's more collaborative in the moment, it's going to allow us to kind of gather more information and make it more targeted to what we need to know. I think that's one benefit from it. And things like being able to use, even ChatGPT or a version of that is going to help speed up our thinking time. So it can help start things off and we can be more creative more quickly. I mean, I use it even just in a simple way, like if you need to look up how to write, for example, a process around something, if you need to write a process around internal comms, rather than just staring at a blank piece of paper with nothing, you can start to use these tools to help just speed up your creative thinking. And then you can spend more time collaborating with the people you need to kind of hone it and make it right for your culture and get the feedback from them. So I think it's going to have a huge impact. But I think people are nervous about it, aren't they, in other ways, and they think it's going to take over and remove, dehumanize it as well. But what are your thoughts on it? How's it going to support us?
I think Microsoft have framed it perfectly in calling it Copilot. It's a tool like any other tool that we use that's going to help us, achieve what we need to achieve in a more efficient way. It shouldn't be looked at as a threat from my point of view. We should try and focus on how it can really drive efficiencies throughout our daily lives. And I think if you took, for instance, a salesperson, really what's the most important thing a salesperson does? The most important thing a salesperson does is have engagements with their client, have conversations with their clients. And how can technology, if you looked at their kind of daily life, a lot of what they're doing could be admin driven. It could be taking notes and actions from meetings. And so often they're tied up quite a bit in those tasks. And AI and technology, Copilot, already now can transcribe those meetings, can create actions for the people within those meetings as agreed in those meetings, and also take a lot of the legwork out of the kind of admin and preparing for whether it's meetings or proposals or whatever it is. You said about ChatGPT, it can help build the proposal for you, put these things together, do some research for you, so that you can just show up and do what's really, really important. So if you can have more of those meaningful conversations with your clients as a salesperson, potentially you're going to be more successful and smash your sales targets. So from that point of view, I think it's going to be really, really positive.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really helpful. I think even from an employee well-being point of view, being able to hand off some of those more repetitive admin-heavy tasks and automate things more, even just taking it out of and looking at automation tools as well. Like the more we can support people to use those, the more interesting work becomes, the more meaningful it becomes, and therefore it supports their overall sort of level of satisfaction. So
it's not just AI. AI just happens to be the word or the acronym of the moment. Automation, as it were, as a whole, our Power Platform, and that can by making AI, for instance, being able to talk natural language and being able to then develop an app to help you achieve something in your daily life is massively impactful. And that in itself is going to revolutionise businesses and the way they use technology. I think Satya talked a number of years ago now about how all businesses are going to become software businesses, and that's true. They have to think and operate like a software business. How can we take these repetitive tasks and use technology to automate them? And AI is just kind of the next step in that process. It happens to be the step that will accelerate the speed in which and the velocity in which that change is going to happen. But yeah, it's an exciting time, and I think people should start to embrace it and start learning the tools that are now available across the Microsoft stack, for instance, but obviously other technologies that are out there as well. So we're all using different apps, and AI is being weaved into it already. So yeah, it's going to be big change in the next few years.
Yeah, exciting to see what happens with it.
Absolutely. So employees often seek opportunities for growth. How do we support professional development and career advancement here at Infinity Group?
So I think we sort of touched on it a little bit with looking at the 3x3. So we have career pathways that are being developed for each area of the business and for each role within that, so people can start to be clear on how they can grow and develop across their roles. We've also got learning plans across each department, so people kind of individually look at what is it that they're interested in learning. There's two elements to it. There's kind of one, what do they have to do? What are the technical skills they need? But also, what are the maybe more interpersonal and personal skills that they'd like to develop? I think it's really important to consider, if you are looking at promoting someone into a management role, do they want to be a manager? Because not everybody does necessarily, or maybe, and if they do, how do we help support them grow into that management role? One of my kind of areas of focus is over the next sort of year is going to be looking at how do we maybe centralize some of this, so make a consistent approach across the business. You've grown really quickly, you've got lots of people coming in, so it's really important that we look at kind of consolidating what we do and how we make it more of a consistent approach, and really supporting our managers to be, like we were saying, be confident in holding good one-to-ones. And a lot of that is around having good coaching conversations, helping them know how to have those really clear kind of objective goal-setting meetings, and then how to help their people work towards them and hold them to account and support them to achieve that. So that's something that we would be looking at introducing and kind of building on what's already in place. We also run team coaching sessions. So I'm going to be looking at maybe doing some kind of teamwork around good communication, how to give good feedback, how to have those more challenging conversations, and really investing in our evergreen talent, as we've said before. So, looking at what are the apprenticeship schemes we want to be running, where do we want to be, getting our younger talent from, and I think a key area that I think is important is getting people to understand what's important to them. So give people the opportunity to ask them, what is it that you want to focus on? What objectives do you want to grow into? What are your goals for your development beyond what's the just the standard demands of the role? And then the top sort of layer on top of that is celebrating it. So really openly talking about when someone's when someone's done well, how do we recognize them? How do we praise them? How do they get rewarded for achieving what they've been set out to achieve? And making that a real cultural norm. So really making a really open culture of success and open culture of recognition, because that's really motivating for people to see that, other people are being rewarded for what they've done. And I think we've touched on this briefly, but linking it to the business's success. So we've got the EMI share scheme now, so people can work towards their goals and their objectives, and that links to them getting something back from the business in time. So I think it becomes more of a holistic approach to development as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what role do you think leadership plays in this, creating a great working environment, a great culture? How are we accountable? How do we best turn up?
Good question. So I think that kind of is the future of the business, isn't it? So a big one here is role modeling. So as leaders, we want to be role modeling to the business best practice, good behaviours, the expectations that we expect from others in terms of communication and how we show up every day. We want to be really building on this idea of candor over comfort. So being able to deal with difficult situations quickly, learn from them, move on, and not get too bogged down in the challenges that can come with that. Because the more we can create that culture of really being okay with being candid with each other, and that cycle, and it's coming from a place of being psychologically safe, then you're more able to deal with problems quickly and move through them, which is great when you're growing at such a rapid rate and needing to be agile. I think being able to really show and demonstrate and live flexibility is going to be key. Like, the people want flexibility. That is the future of work. I don't think it's an either or model anymore. It's not going to be everyone has to be in or everyone has to be out. It's very much about adapting to how people want to work. And I think a big part of that is looking at that at a macro level, but also at a more individual level. Like you said, some people need different workspaces, they need different environments to work in. So how can we help people find a way that works for them but also suits the business as well? And a lot of that comes down to trust between the business and the employees, so giving them the trust and them demonstrating the trust back. And I think being mindful of what are the causes of people's stress. So when we look at, if we're noticing that somebody's maybe not coping as well, what is it that's causing that? How can we help support them? Let's look at that quickly and not let it build up. Often some of this is just needing good communication. Perhaps they need some help with sort of prioritization. Maybe they need some more resources, and being able to kind of act on that quickly is really key from a leadership point of view. And I think we've touched on this briefly, but feedback, so continuous feedback, and that's listening to the business, listening to our people, responding to it, showing them what we're going to do differently or what we can, and being transparent about what we can't do, and being able to just keep that channel of continuous feedback and communication open as much as possible. What else? Anything else from your point of view that you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think just continue to be, I guess, humble in the sense that we're learning as we're going on this journey as well. There's lots of factors that change on a daily basis, and as you mentioned, we're growing really, really quickly, and we're learning on our feet as well. So making sure that you listen and you communicate well. Hopefully, we're trying. We are doing that, and our teams can see us do that. So I just think it's about make sure you stay humble and that you listen and you take action where needed quickly is important. So yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely. I think those are key points. Thank you.
Louise, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a really, really, really interesting chat. Look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, Rob. I've enjoyed it too. It's been good to talk.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.